Welcome to Grant's Rock Warehouse, and tonight I want to welcome Dave Luben to the show. Tonight we are looking at Supertramp. In particular, we're going to look at those A&M years between 1974 and 1979. So without any further ado, let's get started.
He's in his basement, and he's worldwide. Grant's Rock Warehouse.
Welcome to Grant's Rock Warehouse, and I want to welcome Dave Luben to the show. Last time we saw Dave was on the April Wine series that we just recently wound up. That series went for like a year, but we finally completed it. But tonight we are looking at Supertramp. So we're going to look at let's say this. The band formed in 1970. They were more of a prog outfit, though I don't think as they kept moving through their career, they were more prog oriented. I wouldn't say that, but we're going to look at the core records that really established them. And people love this band. So we're going to look at Crime of the Century from 1974, Crisis, What Crisis from 1975, Even in the Quietest Moments from 77, and Breakfast in America from 1979. They did have other records after that, but we're going to look at these four core records. So we're just going to do a loose discussion, just kind of talk about the records. We both love Supertramp, and that's what we're going to do. So Dave, how are you? Nice to see you again.
Yeah, great to be back, Grant, and getting my opportunity to talk about a band other than April Wine, and talking about Supertramp is a great choice for me. Another one of those bands I grew up with. My family, and I'm not talking about me and my two brothers, we loved this band growing up.
Mm-hmm. Well, how did you get turned on to Supertramp? I mean, what was your gateway drug, so to speak?
So Supertramp had an interesting I grew up in Canada, in Montreal to be specific, and Supertramp had an interesting projectile in terms of their fame, and their first album, and that one being right here, The Crime of the Century, was a huge monster hit in Canada. How big a hit was it? It sold 1 million copies in Canada, which means that 1 in every 35 people owned a copy of this record. And if you want to extrapolate that further, that means 1 in every 5 to 7 households had a copy. And our households was one of them. In fact, all 4 albums that we had today, between myself and my two brothers, we had owned LPs of each of them. And actually, I was the youngest, and really I became a fan because they just played the heck out of all 4 of these records.
Mm-hmm.
I would say by the time we got to Breakfast in America, that was probably more. Now I'm starting to enter the teen years at that point, and I was probably the bigger fan of that one, but the previous 3 was them.
Well, I would say that Breakfast in America is definitely the peak. You look at Crime of the Century. I'm not sure if they had any idea that it would be as big as it was, but it did a lot better in Canada. Like you said, it got number 4 here. In the US, it only got to 38. In the UK, it got to number 3. So it was a big album and a beautiful sounding record too, an audiophile favorite,
So it, you're right. It did get to number 4, but I mean, it has, and also, I have the CD over here. Really cool album cover.
Yeah.
If you're like me and you were a fan of the original Superman movies, that kind of looks like the Phantom Zone, doesn't it?
It does.
Filmed, and I think that
my God,
what they're going for there. But yeah, it's an outstanding album, and what I recall was I had some friends at in the United States at the time in 1979, and they knew about Breakfast in America, and I remember saying, "Hey, you've really got to listen to Crime of the Century,"
mm-hmm.
and I was telling them about all the great songs that were on that. But one thing that's kind of interesting about Crime of the Century is it in the United States they had a top 40 hit, Bloody Well Right. But they didn't have a top 40 hit in Canada. It's just the album was just extremely huge, and it just, like I said, it just took off there. They were selling out concerts, and selling out the hockey arenas and everything else like that. So,
yeah, Bloody Well Right just barely entered the top 40. It got up to number 35 in the States, but it got to 49 in Canada though. I mean,
but the interesting thing about it is that means that it actually, if you look at the album, was a moderate success in the United States.
yeah.
So it's not like nobody heard of them. It obviously must have been getting played, and then that probably was the when the ARR radio stations were starting to become a big thing, and that would be across United States and Canada. And so I'm thinking it was mainly the sales of that album were probably generated by those types of radio stations, I'm guessing.
I would assume, yeah.
Yeah, certainly in Montreal, I referred to this in the April Wine Show a number of times. We had one of those called Chaume FM, still around today, and it was an album-oriented rock station. And I mean, they still play that. They to this day they will still play this album quite a bit.
Yeah. It's a classic. It's a classic. I will give you that. I'm just curious though, Dave, you've had a lot of experience with this record. What would you rate this record?
I'd give it, I think I would have to go and give it the full 5 stars. I think every song is good up until, I'm not a huge fan of the final 2 songs, if everyone was listening, in Crime of the Century, but everything from 1 to 6, I think is excellent. I consider School, it's not my favorite song, we're going to get there, but I consider School, when I think of Supertramp, that's the signature song for me. It just represents what that band is all about, and that's just brilliant. They're brilliant musicians, and the way these songs are put together, and that song just has a little bit of everything. It opens up with the harmonica, you've got some piano solo, you've got great vocals, and then you've got actually both lead singers and lead musicians, Rick Davies and Roger Hodgson, both singing verses in that song.
Yeah.
Hodgson is the lead vocal, but Davies does a chorus in it that just works in excellently. So I think that's probably think it's about my second or third favorite Supertramp song, but this song is loaded with great ones. Hide in Yourselves is a fantastic song. Asylum is another fun one, and it's a time they're a little bit preachy at times. They're trying to get across a message in these songs, but they mix in a bit of everything. They've got woodwinds in these songs. They've got harmonica, and then and keyboards are all kinds of different keyboards are all over their music.
Yeah. Well, this was in that era that, Rick Davies and Roger Hodgson were still co-writing together. As Supertramp progressed, they became further and further apart. But here, I think it was like a perfect blend of both of these gentlemen, But you've got, it's not a strange I was going to say it's a strange record. It's not a strange record, but it has some very commercial aspects considering, early 70s, but then it's still, like you look at Rudy, or if everyone was listening, that are still, I wouldn't say those tracks are too commercial to me. It's not like School and Bloody Well Right or Dreamer. Obviously those are hit singles, but it's a good mix between, I don't want to say prog. These guys always get looped into prog, and I don't know. I never looked at Supertramp as being a prog band. Did you ever look at them that way? I mean, how do you look at them?
I kind of look at them as progressive rock, but they kind of straddle that line of pop. So if there's such a thing as it's kind of a weird mix. You can't. If I think of progressive rock, they're not Genesis, and I think of Genesis is more of a progressive rock band. They at sound not. It's interesting you're saying this particular one really is. I wouldn't call anything too poppy on this particular one. But even Bloody Well Right and Dreamer, to me, those are probably the most pop rock songs, and actually they were both hit singles. Actually, it's interesting to point out, Dreamer became a hit song for them, hitting number 15 in the United States years later as a live song. So we were talking about hit songs that came about from this particular album, but I mean, I mean, their songs are. They just mix so many different kinds of instruments, right. And at times they've played these songs with orchestras, and they sound excellent that way too. So there, you can do a lot with this type of music. It's very hard. I know what you're saying. It's very difficult to categorize it, but if it's like they're all over the place. There are times where you see even hints of kind of like Pink Floyd type music when they start using like sound effects and things like that. So it's this particular one, I think I would call it progressive rock.
Okay. Hey, that's fair enough. Not that we have to categorize it into a certain genre, but I've just seen that they it's almost hard to pigeonhole Supertramp. I'm just saying. So because they cover so many bases.
It's complex music. I mean, it is. It's this takes incredible timing and a lot of production, and I'm sure it must take a lot of rehearsing to get these types of things right. So.
And that's the one thing about this record. Ken Scott, engineer, producer, holy crap. His work on this record is, like I said, this is one of those records that people consider an audiophile classic. This is one of those records people use to test stereo systems because of the audiophile quality. It's a great record. It sounds great. I think most of the CD versions of this record, heck, even probably the vinyl pressings of this all sound really good. But yeah, it's a classic. It covers a lot of ranges. But you would give this a 5. Is that what you said?
I think I'm going to give it a 4.5 because, those last 2 songs, they've never been able to kind of. That's where this album has always kind of lost me. It was on those last 2 songs. So
well, it does kind of lose its steam a bit.
Songs 1 through 6, every single one of them I really like. Although, interestingly enough, I'd say that if I was to rank them 1 through 6, probably Bloody Well Right and Dreamer would probably be 5 and 6 there. So, even though they were the hit songs, because again with this band, it's more of I find the music very interesting. Those songs are a little more poppy. They're not quite as interesting, and they're, man, I still enjoy them. Don't get me wrong, but it's just, I find the other ones are. I mean, like anytime school is playing, it's like, okay, I gotta listen to this whole song if it's played on the radio.
It's a classic. Yeah.
I'm
told you're totally with what everybody else says. Like All Music gave it 4 stars. Record Collector gave it 5. Rolling Stone Album Guide gave it 3 back in the day. But don't forget, everybody, Rolling Stone Album Guide usually hates everything. I would give this a solid. God. I would probably give it a 4.5. Well, I might. It's hard. It's hard to rate this catalog. Let's say this. It's hard to rate this album and Breakfast in America because those 2 records kind of go hand in hand. It's weird, but we're going to talk about it. I guess I'd give this a solid 4 out of 5 because think about it. Yeah, those last 2 tracks, they just kind of. But. It's I would highly recommend it for like a gateway drug. If you're getting into Supertramp, I would totally recommend this record, so there it is.
A couple of other accolades here. There's CBC's Jeff Edwards ranked it the 10th greatest album of all time. So again, that popularity in Canada, we talked about that. And in the book, 1001 Albums You Must Hear Before You Die, it was in there too. So
we're probably being too harsh. We probably should have gave this 5 stars.
Right. Well, as I said, it gets 5 stars until those final 2 songs, and it's just they've never. It's like, okay, I get to Rudy. I'm kind of good with this. I can turn it on. I mean, I can listen to it. They're not bad. It's just that it's not. It's like, yeah, okay, I can get up. I can go. So.
So that brings us up to 1975. They brought Ken Scott back. This was an album that, after Crime of the Century, they were an in-demand band. This was kind of a rush album. A&M wanted them back in the studio to produce something else, and I don't think Supertramp was exactly ready. But they did have Ken Scott on board. This came out, summer 75? November 1975. It was recorded in summer 75, came out in November 1975. And, I don't know. What do you think of this record? I mean, do you think this album was rushed, or there's some great songs on here? I don't know. Are there any songs on here that are strong as what came on Crime of the Century?
All right. So you want to talk about irony when it comes to me and Supertramp.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, this one is my favorite.
Okay. All right.
Now I have surprised in the past with ones that other people say aren't so great. Like that happened with April Wine Forever for now, and then
Yep.
this one,
You
interestingly
are
enough,
the contrarian, and
I
we
guess
aren't
so.
even on the contrarians day.
So this particular one, actually, a lot of it was leftover material from Crime of the Century. Now I like this album so much. I'm wondering, well, why? Well, okay, I can understand why they needed the song "Crime of the Century" on it, but I'm thinking that there's a lot of great stuff on this,
Yeah.
and there's something about this one. I just really enjoy listening to this. Pretty much from 1 to 10. Some of the songs I don't like as much as others, but first of all, it's got my absolute favorite song on it, and my favorite Supertramp song. I mentioned "School" would be about my second favorite. Is "Sister Moonshine." That's just one of those songs. It's playing, and it's a great driving song. And I also like the way Easy does it. Begins the album. It begins with a little bit of like a little whistling, a little outside, and it goes into a nice little melody, and then it goes right into Sister Moonshine with some of the saxophone and everything that it's gotten there, and it really sounds excellent. It's just this high tempo song that when I was reviewing for the show, I said, is it still going to be my favorite? Yeah, still my favorite
All
song.
right. Well, that's cool. That's excellent.
But it never really drops this one. I mean, there's so many great songs on this. Another Man's Woman. I mean, that's a fantastic song to end side one. Lady was another one I've always really liked. And one thing I was kind of interesting about this one is that their number 9 song, I think, should have been the number 10 song. I always found The Meaning to be a great song, and I think it would have been a great concert ender, and I think it would have been a great song to end the album with, personally. But
well, there you go. Well, I just want to say that Roger, when the album came out, he was not happy with the record. He thought it was a rushed job, but then he turned around in the 80s and thought that this became his favorite Supertramp album.
So yeah, then sometimes you get that kind of support.
Well,
I saw that, and I didn't know that. I found that out too when going over these albums for the show. I said, hey, the musician agrees with me, the creator. So there you go.
I mean, to me, I think the album sounds great. Like I mean, but there's no track on here quite like what came before, as far as pop hooks, a definite single. Yeah, Lady was a single, but how did that fare? Do we know how that did on the charts? I don't know.
Yeah, unfortunately, nothing here really charted.
Yeah.
And then the results were not as good. I mean, as I said, they sold 1 million copies of this in Crime of the Century in Canada. It went down to 100,000, which, by the way, is still considered a platinum album in Canada.
Okay.
It has no designations whatsoever in the United States. And
wow.
The interesting thing about this one is that, as we talked about, Crime of the Century was a moderate success. They definitely made a dent. They definitely dropped with this one. And when we get to the next one, the big question was, could they make the comeback? And we'll get there.
Right.
Yeah,
this record got to number 44 in the States.
Yeah.
And I see the year-end charts in Canada, it was number 85. So it fared much better. It got to number 12 in Canada. It did much better, Worldwide, I don't think it was the US where it fared poorly. New Zealand got to number 6. UK got to 20, which is, it's okay. But Canada did pretty well. So,
but it's kind of the forgotten one of these four, for sure. I personally, I think unfairly, and actually, what I think is kind of interesting is I actually find it's a little more kind of simplistic and poppy, and it's a lot more similar to Breakfast in America, which we know became the huge hit for them, than their next one.
See, I see Crime of the Century being more like Breakfast in America. I think as far as the tonality and a lot of the songwriting, I think a lot of that could be interchanged. I don't hear anything like Breakfast on here, really. Me. But, Dave, we all hear things differently. So,
Yeah, to me, it's more songs on the album. It's more sort of like these quick hitters. I find them a lot more hooky, as it were. So That's interesting. I hear it. I actually see albums 1 and 3 as more symbol. I see Prime of the Century and even the Quietest Moments as more concept albums, and then I see Crisis What Crisis and Breakfast in America as more they're getting into more of a pop radio.
Well, yeah, they're more pop oriented. I look at those middle two records there as more, even I give a little bit, that's in that pop vein, but I still think that record has a lot more to do with Crisis What Crisis than anything else. But whatever. Just saying, throwing it out here. But there's one thing you cannot argue: the album cover on Crisis What Crisis is absolutely phenomenal. Isn't that a Hypnosis cover? I can't remember, isn't it?
We've got actually we've got someone sitting under an umbrella, and then he is behind like some sort of an industrial area, and then in the back we've got them on the beach.
But yeah, it's Paul Wakefield. It's not a Hypnosis cover. But if you've ever seen a lot of Hypnosis covers, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. It kind of looks like a Hypnosis cover to me. Great cover though. You've got the color, and then you've got the industrial and the black and white in the background. So yeah, I love it.
Possibly, yeah.
So what would you rate this record, Dave?
So yeah, this would be a 5-star for me. There are a couple of songs that I don't care for quite as much, but I listened to this 1 to 10. Granted, if I'm picking my top 10 Supertramp songs, about 5 of them are on this. I like it that much. Yeah,
I like it.
It's probably the one that I'll listen to most consistently as well.
Well, you know what? I look at this as being a sign of a great band, or so far, because, you and I both have two totally different looks about this record. We look at it differently, but maybe that's what's great about it, because everybody can look at these records. Well, this is the best record. No, this is the best record. I'm just saying it's a sign of a great band. But I would probably give this record, I can listen to it, but a lot of it to me is not as memorable as what came before. I'd probably give it a solid 3-star review. There's nothing here it all sounds great, but I'm always looking for those hooks. I want something that I can remember later and I can't get out of my head. You get that on Crime of the Century. You don't get that so much here, but it's all well played. The engineering is fine. It's hard to complain about it. But then you look at what came before, and that's the problem. What one needs to really do is look at these albums as they stand on their own. And sometimes you get, it's hard to do that.
So it's so easy does it, Sister Moonshine. They don't do it for you.
Well, it's okay, but it's not like
that's such a
I don't know. We all hear things differently. That's all.
It's also the vocals in Another Man's Woman. The way he sings really quick, and it's angry, and and then the meaning is as I said. I think the meaning is one of their. As I said, they've got 5 of my favorites on here, and hey, the majority agree with you. This was of the 4 we're going to talk about tonight. This was the worst performing of the 4, but this is one of those cases where I guess I'm against the majority.
No, it's fine. I love it. I just think on the next record they kind of pick it up, and they're trying to go, oh, geez, we better get things together. But we all hear it differently. So I would, like I said, I give it a 3. You give it a 5. That's totally great. I'm totally into it. So by 1977, April 77, they released Even in the Quietest Moments. Now this
the original album of this one. This was from a record store in 1977. It's the only one from our household that managed to survive, because it was the only one that was actually technically my album. And
you protected it.
And we got I did protect it. It's actually in pretty good shape. As you can see, and it's definitely a classic. There you go, the piano and the snow, whole thing.
Yeah, again, another great album cover. I don't think there's any bad album covers with Supertramp, but this record, well, it kind of got mixed reviews too. Robert Christgau, who hates everything, gave it a C plus, and he gave the last album a C plus. Rolling Stone record guy gave it 3 stars. Of course, they hate everything too. All Music give it a 3.5, but the record leads off with Give a Little Bit, which is, it's kind of like Dreamer. It's kind of like, it's that Roger songwriting that pop songwriting with that pop sensibility. I mean, as soon as give a little bit, you're just totally taken in. The only other thing I can say is there's not really anything quite like that on the rest of the record.
So they basically give a little bit. As I had alluded to in the last one, it was like, could Supertramp make that comeback?
Yeah,
they definitely did. They exceeded what they had done with Crime of the Century, at least in the United States, and they rebounded quite nicely. The album itself reached number 16 here, and Give a Little Bit was a top 20 song. As you said, it's a nice little pop hit, perfect for radio, perfect for not only for rock radio, good for mainstream radio too. You can hear it. This is a song that I still hear quite frequently on classic rock stations today, and it's not from Breakfast in America. It's probably the one that it's probably the song I'll hear most frequently that's not on Breakfast in America.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's some nice vocals by Roger Hodgson. It's a much simpler song than a lot of their stuff, but I think it was what they needed. I think they needed to have kind of that hit song to kind of say, okay, yeah, we can do this.
Right.
And yeah, it was a good song. They did try to get one more hit song out of this record from now on. It's a good song, but it didn't chart.
That's like it's funny that they released that and that didn't lead side 2, but that's okay. I don't know. How do you compare this record to what came before? Don't you think, well, you probably don't. I think that they're very similar records, though. I think they sound a little bit more inspired here. I don't know. I'd rate this album higher. What would you rate this?
It's a hard one. To me, I do not hear the same thing as Christ is What Christ is. So there's a lot more complexity.
Oh, I don't hear that. Well, okay, go. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, first of all, I mean, let's.
You mean more prog?
There's just a little bit of everything, and it ends, of course, with the Fool's Overture.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that's a song that they put their heart and soul into to come up with something like that. I mean, that's that's a 10-minute song. You don't have. I think it's certainly on these 4 albums, it's their longest song.
Yeah,
and it does work. I mean, it's got all kinds of things. It just changes tempos. I was talking about if you look on YouTube, you can find performances of this song and done with orchestras. It sounds excellent. So Roger Hodgson himself said he could hear all parts of an orchestra in his head when he started playing this song, and then sure enough, he wanted to play the song with an orchestra. But it's got a little bit of everything, including Winston Churchill's famous World War II speech, and that could have been kind of cheesy, but it actually works quite well.
Yeah, I agree.
It's a song that has it all. So for this one, that is my favorite song. That would make my top 10. Supertramp song. The only other one on this album that would possibly make it, or it might be 11 or 12, would be the title track, Even in the Quietest Moments.
Mm-hmm.
The rest of it for me, I think it's a good album. It's a little bit different in that it's just 7 songs.
Well, when you've got a 10-minute track, that kind of cuts into it.
No, and that was something that rock bands did in the day. Certainly, Rush used to do a lot of that. They put out albums with 6 or 7 songs, but very long songs, so nobody was disappointed.
Well, I think. Yeah.
But there's only 2 for me. There's only 2 really great songs on this album, and for me, it's Fool's Overture and Even in the Quietest Moments. I mean, I like some of the others, like Loverboy, Give a Little Bit, but they don't have the same kind of impact as those. I don't. Again, they're not. They're not like great pop songs to me. Like, they're good pop songs, and they don't have the complexity or all the or I don't. It just. I just don't find them as they are not. They just don't. I don't know. They're not. The overall album is not a crime of the century to me. It's not like one song after another go, wow, this is great, wow, this is great. Wow,
It's not at that level.
yeah.
But I do think this album is on the right track because I think there's a lot more, as far as melody goes, much more memorable songwriting. This is the thing. With Supertramp, I'm one of those guys that really likes a good pop hook. I like that whole pop sensibility, not like American Top 40 cheesy pop, but good songwriting, Beatlesque songwriting, something that could have just came out of the 60s on the radio to some degree. And I think Roger, as far as a songwriter, can deliver that. Now, why he doesn't deliver that all the time, I don't know, but you have to admit, they're both in. He and Rick are both in this band together. It's a partnership, but obviously Roger can write these pop songs, syrupy, just absolutely hook galore that just brings you in, and I just love it. And I think we see a lot more of that on Breakfast in America, and that's why it really hits home. But Give a Little Bit's kind of like a taste of that, even though we've had some of that on Crime of the Century. They were trying, those first two albums just totally failed. And they knew they had to do something to try to get a hit, or A&M would have dropped them, or whatever the story was. I think that's what they really had to come up with something, and they delivered. This is kind of on that trajectory, I think, but it's not quite there. But even in the quietest moments, look at that. Roger Hodgson, even in the quietest moments, is a classic. Give a Little Bit is a classic. I haven't heard it in a long time, Dave, but they used to play Even in the Quietest Moments quite a bit. And that's a 6-minute song, but on FM rock radio back in the day, they used to play that quite a bit. I don't know.
The verse from Fool's Overture was used for like all kinds of things. Like, just to give you an idea, it was used it was used as part of a news program in Canada called W5. The theme was used for that. But you would hear that on if you were watching, let's say, Wild World of Sports back in the day, or the sports program, you would hear that verse used quite constantly. I almost kind of feel with this album was like, okay, we got to have a hit, and I want to have kind of like my masterpiece. So I think his masterpiece was Fool's Overture, and it was like, we're going to come up with a pop hit that's going to be Give a Little Bit, and then the rest of it, I mean, they're great musicians, they came up with good songs, but I think the filler in between, it just didn't match up to, let's say, a Crime of the Century type of situation.
So do you think
I almost wonder if so much focus was put on those two things. Let's have a hit and let's have a masterpiece. Like, to me, Fool's Overture would be, to them, in some ways, maybe what a Freebird was to Leonard Skinner, that type of thing, where it's like, okay, this is what our band is all about, that we can do all these things with music. For Skinner, it was all about, look at what we can do with guitar and piano. So I think that it was, I just feel like with this, that's where the focus was, the hit song and the masterpiece song.
Well, do you think this is Roger Hodgson's? Do you think this is his record? I mean, you mentioned Fool's Overture, and then you look at Even in the Quietest Moments.
Yeah.
Give a Little Bit. I mean, well, it's split up equally. Okay. Well, pretty much. No, Davies has 3 tracks and Roger's got 4, but
he's got the 2 that I spoke of.
Yeah.
And plus, and probably, as we're talking, I mean, and I'm saying, well, this one's my favorite, that one's my favorite. Most of them are Hodgson songs. Most of my favorites. Now, having said that, there are, Another Man's Woman is a Davies song. So there are ones that are exceptions to that rule, but I'd say those are generally the ones which I seem to be leaning to, in terms of when I'm talking to you about which ones I seem to prefer. Right. And I'm not doing that on purpose. That's just what I'm hearing.
So what would you rank this? What would you rate it?
Yeah, this one I would give, it's something between a 3.5 and a 4. I think I'm gonna go 3.5 on this one.
All right. I'm going to go 4 on it because it's right.
Yeah.
It's getting there where I want them to be. It's in that sweet spot for me, but everybody's different. All Music gave it 3.5. And like I said, Robert Christgau gave it a C plus. He wasn't a big fan of it. Well, it's Robert Christgau. I'll just leave it at that. But Rolling Stone Album Guide gave it 3. So you're right in that. I like it a little bit more than that. But you're right in there. You're right in there, Dave.
It went platinum in Canada, by the way, and it went gold in the US. So those were the certifications of the two countries.
Yeah.
And it did get played a lot on the AOR station back in Montreal quite a bit.
But it
And
did
that included the long songs too. Like even the Fool's Overture would get its share of playing. Like I said, they would use excerpts from those songs from TV shows, movies, everything. So.
And that would have to help it too.
Yeah.
I mean, Billboard 200 got to 16, and that's not bad. I think it's a great record. I mean, is it the best record? No, but
it's solid. But I think
it's solid. That's for sure.
But now we're getting to the explosion.
Yeah, we're looking at Breakfast in America from 1979. If you look at the charts on this and the reviews, well, this gets similar reviews like Crime of the Century. I mean, All Music gave it 4.5. Most of the reviews you get, well, you do get some 3-star reviews, but most of them are like 4-star. How did this perform in the US?
Well, this album, just to give you an idea, #1, US, Canada, UK, Norway, Japan. And to give you an idea, 4 million copies sold in the United States, 1.5 million sold in Canada. So it outsold Crime of the Century. So I said, what did I say? 1 in 6 families owned in Canada. That means 1 in 4 homes had this album. And 20 million worldwide, nominated for 4 Grammys, won 2 Grammys. So I think they did what they wanted to do. I think with this one, it was important that they proved themselves. We can have that huge monster breakout hit.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to compare this to, and they didn't have to wait as long, but I like to compare it to REO Speedwagon, who, when they released High Infidelity, they waited so long for that huge monster hit album. These guys had to wait 5 albums till they got to that point, but they were determined to do it, and I just listed off the accolades. They did it.
Mm-hmm. Well, you look at side 1. Holy crap! Logical Song, Goodbye Stranger, Breakfast in America. Oh, darling. I mean, there's one thing about Supertramp you have to admit. They knew how to sequence a record.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
All these records that we're talking about, I think, have really great sequencing.
Oh,
especially Crime of the Century. And this, I think it's like perfect. You listen to side 1, it's like, oh, here's another hit. Oh, here's another hit. And,
but I found Crisis What Crisis had fantastic sequencing, but like I said, the general public, the general album buying public, you obviously didn't agree, but for me, that was the one that kind of showed that this is where it was capable. Now, the one thing I will say is that this is much more radio friendly.
It is
than Crisis What Crisis. It was like with Crisis What Crisis, they had the concept we're going to put more songs in the album, and I heard more poppy type sounds, but here they really kind of turn that crank a little bit more, that these songs are just played on every kind of stations that there is. I mean, it could be played on adult stations for that matter. So,
it's funny though, as much as this was played back in the day, because when I was a kid, you heard this all the time. You know what? I never hear this, at least in Central Ohio, on the FM rock stations. I don't think they're playing any Supertramp anymore. I never hear it.
Okay, in Northern Ohio, I hear.
You still have it up in Cleveland?
Yeah, I hear Logical Song, Goodbye Stranger, and occasionally Take the Long Way Home. But certainly I hear Logical Song, Goodbye Stranger on the classic rock radio stations.
And I'm just so surprised as strong as these tracks are. You would think they'd still be getting played here in Central Ohio, but maybe I'm listening to the wrong station.
And they're played all the time in Classic Rewind on Sirius XM.
Yeah, I do hear it on there.
Yeah.
But I'm just surprised. Of course, you know how rock radio changes, there's no, we're not, that's a whole other discussion, but what do you think of this album as a, well, I know you like Crisis What Crisis, but how do you view this record?
Um, yeah, this would be a 4.5 star album to me. As I pretty much like every single song. I probably don't like the last two quite as much. The casual conversations, the child division. So that's where it kind of loses me a little bit. But everything 1 through 8 is excellent. What's interesting with this one is that some of my favorites are not necessarily the biggest hits. Like I like and it could be just because I heard the others so much, I don't hear these as much. But
Yeah,
my favorites would be like "Oh Darling" and "Lord Is It Mine," which were played back in the day a little bit, but certainly not nearly as much as "Logical Song" or "Goodbye Stranger."
right.
Um, it's but yeah, I'd give it a 4.5.
I think
What's you can just listen to these songs over and over and over
yeah.
again. I never I really the ones that I really never get tired of them.
Yeah,
I
I don't think this
yeah.
is a perfect record, but I think this is probably, dare I say, the peak, because obviously they never, well, Roger left, after the following record, and but still that record was nowhere near the pop or pop what do I want to say, that album was nowhere near this, at
Yeah,
all.
I felt in some ways I felt the next one was kind of a little bit it was a little bit too much like this, and it was
Hmm.
what I liked about all four of these is I did find each of them were all kind of distinct. And then
Hmm.
I almost sort of felt like on the next album was like they weren't exactly sure then where do we go from here?
Well, they achieved, I mean, where, think about it, Dave. Where can you go after this record? This was a huge record.
Oh yeah,
And,
no,
anybody with the success like this, anybody in the band or the songwriters are going to go, well, geez, what do we do now?
yeah. They climbed the mountain and they didn't know, they
But
weren't
you
sure
think
what to
about it.
do.
I think the album artwork, I think the production of Pete Henderson's great. I think this album sounds great as well. I would give this, oh, I probably definitely give it a 4.5. This is probably my favorite one. Like a lot of other people, this is their favorite one, you know. This is their peak. This is where everything lined up. Um, but they knew what they wanted to do. I think there was a conscious decision after the previous record to hit it out of the park, and they did.
Yeah, I think there was a focus to get to swing their music a little, just enough toward pop to
Hmm.
be able to have this kind of a success.
Yeah,
And to their credit, they did exactly what they wanted to do, and uh, they did it great. The results speak for themselves.
right. It's the most poppy of all of them.
But but it's, as I said, for me, Crisis is my favorite. And then I don't know, between Breakfast and American Crime of the Century, to me they're just such different albums. It's hard for me to say
Right.
which is two and which is three. It really is.
Hmm.
What am I in the mood to hear today? So definitely,
It all depends.
what I can say with absolutely, and it comes out in my rating. And again, this is a good album. I recommend people listen to this, especially just for the Fool's Overture. But um, this is definitely my least favorite of the four, but it's still a great album.
Yeah. I'm kind of going with the general consensus when I listen to all these. This is probably this and Crimes are considered the best, and I kind of think that. But hey, like I said, a great band. Um, Everybody looks at them differently. You have totally different opinion than I do. That's just an indicator to me that, well, all these albums are worthy. You
that,
know,
that that's why we do this.
that's why we do this. We just have a
We-
general discussion and we're talking about it. But I would, if you're going to dive into these records, I think you could choose any of these four. I would probably say, it depends upon what you like. And, if you want something more proggy, maybe go early, or mid. If you want something more pop, go Breakfast in America, even though it still has some art rock prog tendencies to some degree, but I don't know. I think
Truth,
all of these records have a lot to offer.
truth be told, if somebody said to me, okay, I want to get into Supertramp, what should I buy? I would probably steer them toward Breakfast in America, because I think that one has the highest ceiling, lowest floor. I think what it is as me as having grown up with the band and then having heard these albums played over and over and over again in our house, I just developed a certain, you when you're a kid, you hear these things, you associate these albums with different memories, and you remember them in the back and hearing them in the background, eventually like putting them on yourselves. And as if for whatever reason, Crisis is the one that resonated with me the most. But
that's good.
But if I'm steering somebody, a new fan, I think I'd probably go with Breakfast in America.
Yeah, it's a gateway drug. That's probably where I'd start too.
Yeah.
And then branch out. Pick any of those other 3 records. I think you'd be just fine. But I don't know if we've changed anybody's minds, but it's fun talking about it.
Yeah, no, I think they're a great band. As I said, it's I enjoy doing this because I have to admit, as much as I like these 4 albums, I have gotten a little bit away from them over the years, and it's like, oh, well, why did I do that?
But you can revisit them, and sometimes you can look at them in a little bit different light. After time has passed by, you may look at it and go, "Wow, I didn't get that before, but boy, I get it now." You know what I mean?
I will tell you, this was one of the very first CDs I bought when they switched from albums to CDs, and you have to start rebuilding up your CD collection. I remember that picking up like a few CDs to get started, and that was one of the first ones.
Yeah, a lot of those. Go ahead. Sorry.
I also remember picking up this one. This was an anthology CD.
Oh, yeah.
And then it's got a little bit of everything on it. So.
I think all those original Supertramp CDs, if we're just talking CDs real quick, a lot of those original A&M CDs sounded great. I don't think that catalog needed remastered at all, remastering. A lot of that's just to sell more records. But all those original CDs are very pleasant sounding.
This is like an original one, and it basically just transformed. That is what the album looked like.
Yeah,
those lyrics. We have that cover in the album, so they would try to kind of recreate the whole album experience, as it were. So
great stuff.
Original. These other ones are more recent, so probably not.
Yeah, those are the remasters, right? Yeah, I've got those.
Yeah, unfortunately, the albums. The home in Montreal is long gone, and of course, I think I was the only one of the 3 of us who actually kept my record. So,
well, there is something to say about that. That's awesome. Good for you.
Yeah.
Even though that one record really was the one that really survived.
Well, that was the only one that was officially mine back in the day, so that's why it survived.
Okay.
But it was actually given to me as a gift. Long story, but basically, I was one of my brother's friends gave it to me as a gift for my birthday, basically because my brothers wanted it. But luckily, I quite enjoyed the album myself. So
excellent. All right, cool. We just had a discussion on Supertramp. Hey, any of these records, Dave and I could totally recommend. You're looking to get into them. We'd start out with Breakfast in America, and then heck, choose any of those other 3. And then if you like that, branch out from there. Nobody's talking Supertramp, but we're talking Supertramp here in Grant's Rock Warehouse. So, Davey, anything else you want to mention before we sign off? Thank
you for having me on today. Great to talk about Supertramp and relive these albums that I grew up with in my youth.
Yeah, that's what it's about, talking about these bands that no one's talking about. So, but Supertramp was a big band, but I don't know. We're giving them some love today, Dave.
And an awfully talented band, too.
Awfully talented band. All right, so cool. I want to thank Dave Luben for showing up, having a little discussion. You can see Dave, he was on the April Wine series. We did a lot of discussion on April Wine. You can check that down in the link. Please subscribe. There'll be more great content on the way. And I'm sure you'll see Dave back here. We just have to decide what we're going to talk about. But thank you, Dave. I appreciate it. And everybody else, please subscribe, like I said, and we'll see you on the next one.